Hi, my name's Jeremy Nagel, and I'd like to talk tonight about GM and organic farming. Are they really adversaries, or can they be comrades in the fight against malnutrition? Okay, so since the 1970s, when genetic engineering was first invented, there's been a lot of opposition, and some of the most outspoken opponents have been people involved in the organic farming movement. Now, I find this personally really strange because I feel like scientists involved in genetic modification of crops and organic farmers actually have very similar motivations. They all want to try to feed the world, to end malnutrition. They all want to improve people's health by enhancing the nutrition of the food that they eat. And they all want to reduce the environmental impact of agriculture by reducing the need for fertilizers and pesticides. So let's consider some of the arguments against GM that get thrown up. Some people say that GM is playing God, that humans shouldn't be messing with the genes of plants. I'll leave that up to you to decide. That's really a personal philosophical thing. Other people say that GM is dangerous, and this is a legitimate concern, but it really depends on the specific genetic modification that we're talking about. And let's not forget that if a lot of ordinary crops had to jump through the same hoops that GM crops have to jump through, then we probably wouldn't be able to eat things like potato. Nature itself has produced some pretty toxic plants. Another argument is that GM may lead to inequality, because farmers who can afford the best seeds from GM companies might receive a competitive advantage. Now, I hope that doesn't happen, but that's something to look out for in the future. But what I'd really like to talk about tonight is an argument that I find the most powerful one against GM. And that is that GM is just plain not necessary. That we already produce a whole lot of food. We produce something like 60% more calories than we need to feed everyone in the world. And technically, based on that, we shouldn't have a problem. We shouldn't have people starving. We shouldn't be seeing these images on the TV every night asking us to donate money. But the issue here is that there's an unfair distribution of food, and we also, in some ways, waste the food that we produce by feeding it to livestock. So if we could address those problems, and maybe if we could use organic farming to help us address those problems, we wouldn't need GM at all, would we? We could feed the world as it stands right now. But I think there are some reasons why we still need GM in spite of this. The number one reason is that while we might be able to feed the world now with 6 billion people, what are we going to do when we have 9 billion people on the planet? And 9 billion people who want a high quality of life. 9 billion people who want to be able to thrive. Are we going to be able to feed them with the current agricultural system? I don't think so. Second thing is that GM crops can be a lot more productive. So we can grow more crops on the same patch of land. And that might mean that we can free up space for nature, and that we can free up space for cities to house these extra 3 billion people. Another advantage of GM is that we can create crops with better nutrition. A great example of this is golden rice, which is rice that has been genetically enhanced to have higher vitamin A levels, and this is going to solve the epidemic of vitamin A deficiency that causes night blindness and permanent blindness in hundreds of thousands of children each year. And Finally, especially considering the threat of climate change that's coming up, we really need crops that are more tolerant of stress. The predictions for climate change look like countries like Africa, countries like Australia, and continents like Africa are going to have a really hard time with drought in the future. So we need crops that are able to deal with periods where they don't get enough water. And GM is going to provide answers to these problems. So I think those are 4 reasons why we really need to go down the path of GM. But that's not to say that we should throw away organic farming. I really think organic farming is great. I think it's really admirable to try and reduce artificial inputs into the agricultural process. I think we should try to reduce the amount of fertilizers derived from petrochemicals that we put on our farms. And I think we should try to avoid pesticides that might be causing hidden health problems that might be giving us cancer. We don't really know. But I don't see why we can't have the best of both worlds. Why can't we grow GM crops using the principles of organic farming? I think there's a fantastic synergy possible here. And in fact, maybe in the future, maybe in 50 years' time, the way agriculture will work will be that we grow GM crops in what are called vertical farms, so skyscrapers within our cities, because maybe the cities will have taken over the whole world by then in order to house these 9 million people. But because of the efficiency of GM crops, and because vertical farms where you don't have problems with pests will mean that we don't need fertilizers, we might be able to have organic vertical farms where we produce all the food we need within the boundaries of the city. That's the future I'd like to see.